The really wild stuff that's being done in the Amazon is lidar.
Oh, I know.
Where they're finding all this evidence of these ancient structures that were just overcome by the jungle. When the Europeans first came through and they first reported about these immense cities,
They were there.
Yeah, they were there.
Yeah.
And so then when people came back like 100 years later, they're like,
Right.
because the jungle would just overcome everything.
We've survived Orellana's treacherous descent down the Amazon and went looking for the famous explorer Percy Fawcett. But now it's time to dig deep into the newest evidence to come out of the jungles of South America that threatens to shake history to its very core. In case you haven't seen my last two videos, here's the scoop. 1541, a famous conquistador by the name of Francisco de Orellana started to descend the Amazon River. He managed to reach the Atlantic and sail back home to Spain, where he told amazing stories of cities made of white stone and highly developed societies of indigenous people living deep in the rainforest.
The jungle just overtook these cities, and now they're finding these cities with something called lidar. They use these planes and they circle over this area, or helicopters, whatever the they do, and they shoot this down, this lidar. It's like laser radar, and it gives you a detailed image of what's below the surface and what's there.
Shit.
And it shows them all these crazy structures.
What Rogan is trying to explain is the so-called light detection and ranging technology, or lidar for short. Have you seen the Drain the Oceans show on National Geographic? Well, imagine if you could drain the rainforest to see what's underneath all those trees and bushes. That's what lidar does, and it can even be used with drones. This new technology is extremely promising, and it is already showing results. I am certain that the next few decades of exploration will be marked by both lidar and underwater exploration. But let's get back to the topic at hand, the cities that started to emerge from the jungle.
For example, evidence that large cities flourished in the Amazon. And then in the last decade, as the clearances of the Amazon have proceeded, we've begun to see the traces of those cities. What happened was that the Spaniards brought smallpox into the Amazon. Smallpox devastated the local population because there was no immunity to it. There was a massive die-off. The cities were deserted. Within 50 years, they were completely overgrown by the jungle, and that's why they were not seen by the explorers who came in 100 years later. But now the jungle's being cleared, those cities are emerging, and we can say that a city like London, which had a population of roughly 50,000 in the 16th century, there were cities of that size all over the Amazon.
Hancock even says that, by some estimates, around 20 million people lived in the Amazon before Europeans came. This is a significant shift from the previous theories. But, unlike debating about the origins of Göbekli Tepe or the age of the Sphinx, here we have undeniable archaeological evidence that supports these claims. Things first started to change in the 1990s, when the American anthropologist Michael Heckenberger decided on an unusual vacation. He wanted to spend some time with the indigenous tribes in the Mato Grosso region of Brazil. The chief of the Quicuro tribe soon decided to take him to a very special site. It was a massive ditch, some 6 to 10 feet deep and more than 30 feet wide. The ditch was obviously man-made, and it ran for over a mile. But even more amazingly, the ditch was full of small shards of pottery. This prompted him to begin a more detailed investigation. The results were amazing. It turned out that the massive ditch was just a small part of a series of earthworks and ancient sites. They were all man-made, and in his own words, significantly larger than contemporary communities. In the following decades, Heckenberger had mapped at least 19 settlements, approximately 2 to 3 miles apart from one another. The area between them was organized into orchards and agricultural fields, and they were connected by massive roads as wide as modern 4-lane highways. The network of roads was created at the same angles, forming a grid that spanned through the entire region. The settlements have been carbon dated to between 800 and 1600 CE, and were estimated to have been home to 2,500 to 5,000 people, which is similar to most European cities of the time. But they were made of mud bricks instead of stone, so once abandoned, they quickly broke down in the tropical climate. Parallel to Heckenberger's research, a Brazilian paleontologist by the name of Alcho Ranzi was doing his own research some 1,000 miles to the west in the Brazilian state of Acre. Earthworks were first noticed there back in the 1970s, and Ranzi was part of that research, but not much thought was put into it. Then, in 1999, he was flying over the area and noticed the strange shapes again. and it fueled his curiosity. He decided to map all the earthworks he could find. They were circles, diamonds, hexagons, and rectangles, sometimes interlocking each other. Each of them was outlined by trenches up to 20 feet deep. His research was published in 2010, revealing more than 200 of these so-called geoglyphs. Similarly to Heckenberger's findings, these geoglyphs were also connected by long, straight roads, creating a massive grid. These were dated between 200 and 1283 CE. Supposedly, around 60,000 people inhabited these settlements, and it accounted for just about 10% of what is actually there. But by 2010, lidar technology was starting to revolutionize modern archaeology. It is basically an infrared beam shooting down from an aircraft. It bounces off the Earth's surface and allows us to create digital maps. Like I said, it strips away the jungle. For the Amazon, where it's impossible to see anything from the air other than trees, and where traversing afoot is equally difficult, this technology was a godsend. In 2018, 81 more geoglyphs were found in the Mato Grosso region using lidar, and 24 of them are being excavated. Like before, roads popped out between the settlements, and invaluable pottery remains and even burial sites were found. Pretty soon, we were able to create a computer model and estimate the approximate population of the area. Just this one area seems to have been home to between 500,000 and 1 million people at its peak. All of a sudden, Hancock's 20 million people in the entire Amazon doesn't seem so far-fetched, does it? But the remaining question is, how did 20 million people manage to feed themselves? I already touched upon this subject in the Orellana video, because for centuries the consensus was that the soil in the Amazon rainforest is very poor and not suitable for long-term agriculture. And that is where terra preta comes in. Also known as dark earth, it is man-made soil that was discovered in various regions throughout the Amazon. It is incredibly fertile, and when added to barren soil, it can make it fertile as well. The exact technology used by the indigenous people to create it is not known so far. It is probably an advanced form of composting that includes biochar. We'll let soil experts deal with that. For us, the important thing is that the use of terra preta supports the idea of massive cities and civilizations in the Amazon. Hancock then adds another rather controversial claim.
Secondly, new evidence, previously not recognized, the Amazon is basically a garden. The Amazon is a man-made rainforest. There are certain trees like Brazil nut trees or the ice cream bean tree, which are food crops, which are very, very valuable, and they dominate the tree regime in the Amazon. They're what's referred to as hyperdominant species.
What Hancock is saying is that the natives cultivated certain trees that eventually turned into a rainforest. Now, I think that this is a little bit far-fetched, and others will agree with me. For example, Paul Rosalie claims that terra preta was mostly found around the ancient cities, and that is exactly where the dominant trees are the food trees Hancock mentions. So it seems that there were specific areas which were gardened, while the rest of the Amazon is wild. But Rosalie, of course, worries about the possible consequences of stating these theories.
What worried me then was then like Smithsonian came out and put out like an article and they were like, is the Amazon created by humans? And it was like, oh God, no. Because like then you're changing it from a designation of like this incredible, complex, wild, ancient ecosystem to, if people don't understand the context of what he's saying, that people engineered it in places. And then the headlines went to, the Amazon was made by people. And then you have people like Brazil's president, Jair Bolsonaro, who's no longer in office, but just being like, well, if we made it, we can manage it, right?
I have to agree. What Bolsonaro meant was, if humans made it once, we can do it again. Which gives him justification for cutting down the Amazon. Whether we will, or even can rebuild it again, is a completely different matter. But we should refrain from statements that could give anyone any justification to tear down one of the last pristine wildlife ecosystems in the world. Now, there's some food for thought. But there is still one major discovery that we need to talk about, and that is the Llanos de Moxos region in Bolivia. It was just recently published that massive urban settlements were found there, unlike anything found in Mato Grosso and Acre. They were much bigger and more developed, with 3 rings of defenses, rampart fortifications, and a network of roads, smaller settlements, endless canals, and reservoirs. But that's a story that deserves a dedicated video, so be on the lookout for that one. It's gonna blow your mind.